Look at the scale of this ancient superpower. On one side, you have the towering, unyielding stone pillars of the Egyptian Empire. On the other, a dust-covered, weary family of Canaanite refugees, carrying everything they own. Joseph, acting as Pharaoh's second-in-command, brings his family into the royal court. He carefully selects exactly 5 of his brothers and presents them to Pharaoh in a calculated diplomatic move to formally request asylum. The brothers deliver a unified, specific plea. They explain that the famine back in Canaan has stripped their pastures of grass. They ask for permission to settle as temporary residents in the region of Goshen. The political maneuvering works. Pharaoh grants them the best of the land, but the move places this family in a precarious position. They have a physical haven, yet their survival rests on the favor of a foreign king. Then the dynamic shifts. Joseph brings in his 130-year-old father, Jacob. Where the brothers showed political deference to secure land, the patriarch enters the royal throne room with a quiet, distinct authority. When Pharaoh asks his age, Jacob gives a blunt, unvarnished answer. He states he is 130 years old, but notes that his days have been few and evil compared to the long lives of his ancestors. Standing in the royal court, Jacob raises his hands and blesses Pharaoh, the landless refugee speaking over the king of the world. Egypt holds the grain and the gold, but as Pharaoh accepts the words of the patriarch, the hierarchy of the throne room shifts. The empire's physical dominance meets a power that remains unbroken. Outside the safety of the palace, the severe famine is triggering a continent-wide economic collapse. The drought continues, and the food supply in both Egypt and Canaan dries up. Joseph implements a macroeconomic policy to manage the crisis. In Phase 1, he sells grain to the population until he has gathered the circulating silver and currency from Egypt and Canaan. The money supply fails. With the cash gone, the citizens return the following year. Joseph transitions them to a barter system. The people trade their horses, their flocks, and their herds for 1 year's worth of bread. This initial crisis management prevents mass starvation across the region. It also draws the money and livestock of the population into the state treasury. By the next year, the citizens have their resources spent. Desperate, they approach Joseph with a final offer. They willingly offer to sell their own bodies into servitude and surrender their land just to survive. Joseph accepts the deal. He executes a sweeping nationalization of Egyptian real estate, transferring private property directly to Pharaoh. The only exception is the land owned by the Egyptian priests, who receive a direct food allowance from the throne. To finalize this permanent economic restructuring, Joseph implements a new mandatory agricultural tax. This chart shows how the new system worked. A precise 20% of all future harvest yields goes directly to Pharaoh, while the remaining 80% is kept by the citizens for food and seed. Meanwhile, out in the territory of Goshen, a stark geographical contrast emerges. While the surrounding environment is reduced to harsh devastation, this isolated, lush settlement of Israelites is thriving, growing, and multiplying its livestock. Joseph managed to save a civilization from extinction by turning a nation of free citizens into tenant farmers. Simultaneously, he ensured his own family prospered in the best of the land. 17 years pass. The macroeconomic scale of the empire fades into the background. The focus shrinks down to the quiet reality of a tent, where the 147-year-old patriarch Jacob is nearing the end of his life. Joseph, the man who manages the wealth of an empire, sits at the bedside of his frail father. The architect of Egypt's economy waits for the instructions of a man in a tent. Jacob makes a final demand, invoking a solemn, ancient physical requirement. He forces his son to place his hand under his thigh, a traditional gesture used to swear a strictly binding oath. This family has spent decades in the comfort of Goshen, yet in these final moments, Jacob ensures their identity remains tied to a land outside of Egypt. Jacob issues a specific, uncompromising final command to his son. He says, "Bury me not in Egypt, but carry me out to lie with my fathers." The destination for this oath is far away from the fertile Nile. He demands to be taken back to the ancestral stone tombs located out in the rugged, rocky hills of Canaan. This massive ancient masonry marks the specific structure of the patriarchal tombs. This is where Abraham and Isaac were laid to rest, giving historical weight to Jacob's demand. Joseph formally swears the oath, promising to do exactly as his father has asked. In response, Israel bows himself in worship upon the head of his bed, sealing the family's future trajectory. Survival for this family meant more than weathering a famine. By demanding a grave in Canaan, Jacob secures their path back to the land of the promise.